And I would like to introduce Debbie Dortzbach. She is a nurse specialist in international public health and child health with extensive experience in community-based health assessment, program design, implementation, training, advocacy, and media and material development. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing from Columbia University and both an MN and MPH from Emory University. She presently holds the position of Senior Advisor on the Program Resource Team for World Relief in Baltimore, Maryland, where she pioneered the Couple and Family Strengthening Program known as Families for Life. She also is an adjunct professor in the Department of Economics and Community Development at Covenant College. Get some shout outs there, please. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I thought it'd be a little louder, but okay, that's fine. Together with her husband, she has been with Mission to the World of the Presbyterian Church in America since 1980. She has more than 30 years of experience in rural and community development in Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean, and has resided 24 years in Kenya and 1 year in Eritrea. In addition to numerous papers and presentations, she has co-authored 4 books. We have been looking forward to have Debbie at the ECHO conference for some time. She has been a mentor and a teacher to various staff and interns over the years. And everyone I have met that knows her just raves about her and completely respect her. So we just want to thank you for being here. We're so grateful that you're here with us. And I'd just like to have you come on up and let us welcome Debbie.
So it's really the reverse. I rave about ECHO and your Covenant graduate students very much. And it can be no greater joy than to see you active in changing the world, something you dreamed about, you told me you were so passionate about, and wrote about in your papers, and I graded and said, go for it. But to witness it at this conference is like the peak of a career. And I just turned 70 last month, and so I'm excited to soon be passing the baton to others, and it's wonderful that I can have that privilege and joy of seeing God at work through many of you here at ECHO. So I'm deeply honored to be part of your team and to see what God is doing throughout his world. Because actually, everything I say today is really a composite of many people's experiences and what so many have taught me and continue to teach me. In a couple of weeks, I will be in Burundi, and with the First Lady we expect of Burundi at a pastor's summit, talking about family planning. And in a highly Catholic country, that is a challenge, to be sure, but there's so much learning we're continuing to do and innovation and discovery about one another and about God's plan for the family. And today I want to talk a little bit more about flourishing families and the role that much of what you are doing can play in that development. These people have left indelible marks in my heart and in my own family as I look at different challenges that we have had, and I'm going to expose some of those during this talk. But I'd like to begin, I want to also thank a couple people for sure. And this is really not my talk. I'm just the spokesperson because it is all of these people who have contributed so much. Raphael is here from World Relief, and you can hear him this afternoon at the farm. Oliver is in Turkana in northern Kenya. We have some people there from Rwanda as well who have been very involved in microfinance. Also a Covenant graduate, by the way, Emily Mugisha. Also, we have an intern presently from Emory University working on some research with us, and I'm just so grateful. Milan Kabadege has done pioneering work in maternal child health for many years, and I just get to reap a lot of these good things that God is doing through these wonderful people. We've also been privileged to work with a number of universities, including University of Michigan, which I'll tell you about a little bit, University of British Columbia, and some now at Emory. But what I'd like to say is that I am not a farmer, so I can't speak to your tremendous expertise. But I will say I tried to become one, especially because when we lived with our young family in far eastern Kenya, very rural, very dry, very remote, no electricity, no running water. What did the women do? How could I get to know them? How would I learn their language? How would I participate in their culture? Well, I had to go to the garden, of course. That is where they spent their time. And so one day, they invited me, and I was thrilled because I was sure I wasn't going to contribute very much to this community garden harvesting, which they were all excited about and had arranged for some time. But I wanted to learn. And so when I arrived and a group of women had already come, maybe we were 10 or so, and the field was there, the beans in their pods were piled up into big piles, and we were each given a stick and a bucket. And then I was led to my pile. But before we went anywhere, we all put on our congas, of course, because you have to protect your clothing and make sure that all that dust as you're beating the beans won't get everywhere. So there we were, a whole line of women out in the village. I was dripping wet as I beat with the stick, having no idea that that little thin stick could actually pop out a bean from the pile. And as we were doing this, and the dust was flying everywhere, and I was about to faint from the sun, finally, the ladies said and sang, they were singing together, and they were bringing their harvest together, their beans, said, "It's lunchtime." Hallelujah, I said. And we went and sat down and had our lunch. We took off our congas, and of course my clothes were nice and clean, but my face, my hands, everything had true evidence of not being a farmer. But the worst of all was that I brought my pile of beans, the precious kidney beans that I had retrieved from the pods, and it was maybe half of a little bucket, while the others brought sacks of them. So I did not prove myself to be a worthy farmer that day. But what it did teach me was something so much more that I have continued to benefit from, even from those early years in my 20s, the significance of community, the importance of doing things together, of not only focusing on how to do something like beating the stick and planting and getting the harvest, but also how to be for each other. It seemed to instill to me a sacredness to a humble, very humble task that was so significant, made so all the more by the presence of the family and of each other. I think that in our conferences, farms and trainings, we focus a lot on the how to do, but perhaps not enough of the how to be. I thought when I went to learn in the farm, if success were measured by a full bucket, I would be a successful farmer. But I have learned, and I felt very miserable that day, that I did not yet learn how to produce a bucket of beans, but those women, because of their engagement and their confidence and their joy and their community and support for each other, showed me how to be in community in a relationship that does produce. Home, of course, is more than gardens and grains and goats. It is, after all, people, but people are so complex. Just listen to James chapter 1, verses 16 to 18. This is in the context of the church being dispersed because of suffering. And some accusations that all of that suffering, all of that disbursement was because God had tempted them. But James says, don't be deceived. My beloved brothers, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, from whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Of his own will, he brought us forth by the word of his truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. Of his own will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. This is deeply foundational for every culture. It's the distillation of not only how we began, but how we continue as first fruits. It's unrelenting truth that God does not change and that what he makes is of his will, through his word, and for his way. But James continues with some sobering thoughts. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness that God requires. Therefore, put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. Well, there's a lot of language there that we at Echo can resonate with. It talked about first fruits of his creatures, of the product, righteousness, and of the implanted word. James gives us the very structure that we need to understand not only how to grow healthy food for ourselves and our children, but how to be healthy people. To be his first fruits, to have his product of righteousness through his implanted word. So here is one of those first fruits. And she's here as well. Arube. She is from Turkana, and she is a girl, and she's healthy and robust. She is a positive deviant. Not many children actually look like her in Turkana, in northern Kenya. She lives in a place where there is poor soil, harsh changing climates, plenty of pests, lack of good seeds and other implements, lack of knowledge and strong traditional ways of doing things that have always been done, and the fear that evil forces and counter forces will wreck everything in their family. But Arupe and her parents are positive deviants. They're learning, and they are becoming. Just look here. You can see that the goat is there with lots of good grass. Well, that happens, of course, when it rains occasionally. But the linkage there is that a goat needs to eat the grass to be healthy and not be crowded out with lots of goats in a small pasture with very little grass. Similarly, the same is true with children. Because if they all eat from one pot, which is traditional, then someone's going to be left out. Some child will not be healthy. The times of feeding, when there's weaning food and continue with breastfeeding, and the variety of foods are all things that are being taught here for Arupe to be a positive deviant. She's a positive deviant, though, for many reasons. We want her, she is not wasted or stunted. She will attend school. She will not marry early. She will not be one of the multiple wives with multiple health risks. She will marry a husband who treats her as an equal and without violence. She will plan her pregnancies with her husband and space her children. She will not suffer from HIV, STDs, TB, anemia, overwork, malnutrition, and she will not die in childbirth. Sadly, this is not the norm. It doesn't usually happen that way. But it can change. Her very father is participating in feeding her and her brothers. The food that is made is nutritious. The mom is engaged in breastfeeding and spacing her pregnancies. She has a variety in her foods. These are all interactions that, yes, affect her physical health, so she's not wasted and stunted, but also engage her parents together so that she can be a flourishing child. Her family may do well at herding goats and even learning new agricultural methods. And in fact, the community's had great success in growing cowpeas and tomatoes and watermelons. But will that make her a healthier Arupe? Not until we understand more of the underlying behaviors. And in our experience, one of the key missing elements in this whole pathways to nutrition of agriculture and healthier children is the relationship between the husband and wife. Why? Because you know that sometimes we can have the best garden and a wonderful harvest, and the wife will take it to the market and sell it and be excited about the possibility of school fees and sending her children to school now and storing for the dry season. But the husband will interrupt, take the money, drink it, and come back and beat her. This happens all too much. And it destroys everything for generation upon generation upon generation. So if we are not engaging in this issue of the relationships within the family, particularly the husband and wife, we will not have flourishing families. That is why we look a lot, not only at who Arupe is and what we want her to do, to not die in childbirth, all those things that I just mentioned, but also at the family, the relationships in the community, and whether or not they have implements and livestock and even good farming methods, but also at the beliefs. What is true? At the roots. The values. What is best? Do they understand what is best for them out of their beliefs so that they will make good, wise choices. The actions, what is done, and the results, what is seen. So let's take a look a minute to see how we apply this then to agriculture. I know this is a busy slide. You don't have to read it, but this is an example of healthy farmers and applying some of those issues of beliefs and values and results, actions and results. They're in the unhealthy farmer, his belief may be that ancestors control the level of the harvest. The value is it's best to listen to the advice of a witch doctor and to protect my land from cursing by neighbors. His actions may be that he spends time and money, precious money, that could be used for far better purposes to protect his land from that cursing. And the result, a loss of money. The production is not what it was expected, and he's out of control. A healthy farmer, on the other hand, realizes that God's given me the necessary gifts to produce a good harvest. What we teach, what we embrace, what we learn and adapt. It's best to learn good agriculture techniques and discipline and to increase the production and soil quality. I spend time learning from more experienced farmers, like in the farmer field schools, and experiment with different methods. Those are the actions. The result, I increase my production and income over time. But I'd really like you to see on the far side, Farmer 4, the healthy farmer, there in his beliefs or hers, men and women are equal and made in God's image. It's best to value my own needs and children's needs as equal. I make decisions with my husband about the money to best meet all our needs, and my children and I get the nutrition that we need. So how we deal with this transformation is put into a theory of change, which again is complicated to see. But I just want you to recognize here that as you all know, there are the activities, the outputs, short term, and then the outcomes, moving from left to right. Happy to share more of this with you later. But in particular, the family strengthening is one box and area that has to be in this pathway. That is where joint decisions as couples can be made, where protection and safety for the family is ensured. So how we deal with these beliefs becomes then our theory of change. To try to understand how some of that is impacted, we did some exploration through a study together with the University of Michigan, presented just this past summer in Rwanda, the pathways between agricultural investment and food security and diet diversity. It was a very interesting study. It's still being analyzed more completely. We wanted to understand the relationship between farm investment, potentially through VSLA or the Village Savings and Loans Associations. And this research looked at agricultural inputs and outputs with the healthy family defined as primarily in children and in pregnant women. But the results were not what we really had hoped. In this summary statement, the agricultural investment did enhance crop productivity and diversity, but it did not substantially improve child diet diversity. Additional nutrition behavior change efforts are needed, and farmer field schools and VSLAs both provide opportunity to integrate nutrition behavior change. So, in other words, the higher the crop yield doesn't necessarily ensure healthier families. So we once again need to have a look at how can we not only have higher yields, but more flourishing families. This slide taken from Burundi actually represents a new kind of seed that actually produced 4 times the harvest of maize. And it was very exciting to see, and the couples were very, very excited to have it. But although this seed was improved, the family relationship as well is improving. And you can see right here that the couple are in the center, and they also have become a positive deviant arupe. The program we've designed for this, that we're implementing in all of our work at World Relief, whether it's in savings and loans, agriculture, or evangelism, and also in child development and child nutrition, is a program we call Families for Life. It's quite basic. It really just says men and women are equal. That's how God made us. That we are meant to enjoy each other our whole married lives. That we make decisions together. That our marriage is a safe place. That we spend time together. That we talk together. That we enjoy as a married couple the beauty of sex as God had designed throughout the marriage. There are so many elements that we get into, and it has become hugely popular. So as we look at this couple strengthening, it was born out of our HIV work for many, many years, actually in India, where we went to teach about how you get HIV, how to prevent HIV, how is it transmitted, and all those things everybody knew. But what we were not addressing was the relationship between the husband and wife. Why is that husband going out? What is the relationship like in the home? And actually, we learned from other studies, very secular studies, that the family was deeply valued. So why don't we return to that basic element that God has given and strengthen that as a primary means of behavior change and prevention of HIV? Perhaps we can do the very same in all of our work for improved nutrition or better outputs or part of the value chain. Can this not be an actual part, an element of that value chain? I would suggest it could be the most essential. As we looked at that, we looked for proverbs. We looked for ways to connect culturally, because certainly marriages look differently all over the world. And this is what the community in India, the churches in India came up with, their proverb that says, when the sugar cane is bound tightly in its bark, what can the ants do? So we went to explore, what are those ants? We're going to keep them away. We want to know what those ants are. Yes, HIV. Yes, violence against women. Yes, inequality. Yes, so many, poverty. We could name so many ants. But we want that bark to be bound tightly around that sugar cane because marriage is sweet. And it can only be tasted and enjoyed the way God had designed in the marriage relationship. And it is sweet. And a rediscovery of that has been so exciting to witness in many, many places. This program now is in 8 different countries. It is not a translation of a manual that is spread everywhere. By design, each country has its own workshop with its own end users. They come up with their own proverbs, their own issues, their own situations. All we do is provide some opportunities for discovery through games and interaction, discussion, women talking to women, men talking to men listening to women's responses, and women listening to men's responses, and coming together then to understand what are the essential elements to a flourishing family. We've had this now for 10 years, And we decided to do some research about it. So we went to look. This is a couple from Haiti, by the way, a couple from Malawi. And we decided some of the issues in Rwanda recently, where we were having this workshop, came up. The issues they identified were conflict, poverty, drunkenness, children out of school. Some of the solutions they saw were prayer in the church and resources to help them discover more. As we looked at what we were doing with the Families for Life program over 10 years, we wanted to know, are we making an impact? Well, we did not have a baseline, but we have done an impact survey now and focus group discussions, 18 focus groups in Malawi, 12 in Burundi, and 2 not population-based, but sampling from couples who have completed at least half of the manual in both countries of Malawi and Burundi. We're discovering some interesting things. The focus group discussions, a woman talking to a woman that we separated for some of the questions. Okay, the educational level, you might expect, barely primary in the populations we looked at. Support for gender equitable norms is better than we thought it might be, but we still have a problem because women are still struggling quite a bit with what it means to be considered equitable. We know that females here, 62% higher risk of having lower support for gender equitable norms than males, according to their scores on the Gender Equitable Men scale. But we are encouraged as well because almost 97% of the participants reported that they communicate with their spouse about the spouse's feelings, not just about what did they do that day or what they wanted for dinner, but there was actual interaction. And about 95% said that they can talk to their spouse about their sexual needs and expectations. This isn't usually often done, even in our own cultures. Church attendance is up, and violence is down. Some quotes from some of the participants. I've been married since 1979. All these years, we've not been together as a family. Now we are doing things together as a family for the first time. The program has enhanced development because we are united and able to do tangible development together. This young Haitian girl, oh, she looks so confident, doesn't she? Somehow, as she looks to the future with her hands poised for action, I like to think, I wonder what it will be like. How can we ensure that she not only has a feeding program that nourishes her, that her mom and dad understand, but her mom and dad model for her the relationship between a husband and wife, that she will have opportunity to have that confidence in herself that she carries into her own marriage. I love this picture from Burundi. And the more I look at it, the more I see. With Advent before us, I see the babe, the unity of the Trinity, the one who became us. He became us. The second Adam. Why? To be persecuted, to die, to enable us to have another opportunity to produce his righteousness, to understand and grow in his truth, and to be he is the first fruit of those who rose from the dead, and so will we follow. He has done this. He has come at Advent as a babe to be the first fruit of his creatures, to produce righteousness for us, and to be the implanted word. But what happens when the fig tree does not blossom, when there is no fruit on the vine, when the produce of the olive fail, when fields yield no food, the flocks are cut off from the fold, there's no herd in the stall, when marriages fail, children struggle, when evil prevails, when our toil to make a sustainable earth, feed the hungry, and care for the widow and orphan and disabled and mentally ill is just not enough. I wondered the same. And those verses flooded through my mind when I stood on a lonely, barren, windswept, dry earth in Eritrea, close to the Sudan border. I was 24. My first opportunity in a year-long internship. Very, very unexpectedly, on a Monday morning, I was grabbed by the Eritrean Liberation Front, hauled out with another nurse, meeting other members of that liberation party, and kidnapped and taken with Anna, and forced to run down a narrow valley into the hills beyond. And as we were running, Anna said to me, "Don't be afraid, Debbie. God is with us." Just a few short minutes later, she was with God. The men shot and killed her and forced me on. After a long helicopter ride, a rather dramatic one, after running for 2 hours and then a helicopter ride, we landed near the Sudan border in a very remote place. Oh, the men said to me, "As soon as your husband pays a ransom, you'll go home. The helicopter will come back and you'll go home." So, of course, I waited for it. I prayed for it. I was pregnant at the time, 4.5 months. And every day this was my prayer. "Lord, sustain me. Sustain me, God. I don't know if this goat's milk with goat's hair floating on top that I try to boil is going to sustain this baby. I don't know if the millet that I'm eating," yes, the millet I'm eating will do well. So I'm going to swallow that down. But my emotions, my spirit were so damaged. I felt abandoned. "God, I was doing what you wanted. Everything." I thought. We were treating cholera. People were dying when I was taken from that hospital. I could list all the reasons why it made much more sense, God. I can tell you this, it'll be much more sensible if I go back there and I serve you there than to be stuck here and deliver my baby by myself or who knows what. But please, Lord, please allow me to be home. Allow me to be home. So the helicopter came back. Oh, you can imagine. My heart was flooded with praise. I was singing at the top of my lungs. I ran to the helicopter, and the cleanly shaven pilot from some city, I guess, got out and came over, and then the guards came, and they shuffled a few things around, and I lurched forward to get in, and a man stopped me with his rifle. "You're not going," he said. "Not going." "Oh, but you promised." And I pulled at his shirt, determined to get on that helicopter. But it left without me. Yeah, the fig tree had no blossom. There were no flocks in the stalls. And I thought God didn't care. It was all over. There was no other way. And for a long time, I just sat and wept on that hill. After a while, a long while, I noticed someone was nearby. I looked up, and instead of finding a man with a machine gun and a rifle and a khaki uniform, I saw a woman. She had a red wrap on, torn and tattered, a withered face with a Muslim shawl over it. We were in Tigray company there. I couldn't even speak her language. It was a different language yet. But she walked to me. I walked to her. She held out her hand and took mine. Then she welcomed me back beyond where the helicopter had been on that hill, that empty hill now, no helicopter, to a small hut made of sticks. Nothing inside except a small fire pit and a stone to sit on. She offered me the stone. I sat down, and she put on the teapot. I realized that day that God was there. That yes, I had thought he had abandoned me, but he will never. He will never. Because he is producing in each of us his righteousness so that we might be able to start again, to sustain these trials, and to plant again, to harvest again, to fail again, to gain again. And he puts us in a global family, the church. His first fruit, who abandoned him, but he rescued through his suffering, death, and the resurrection. I don't know if Ade, that's the polite word for a grandmother in Tigray, was an angel, but maybe. I do know God powerfully used her to show to me the significance of relationship, of community, and of God's presence and will, perfect will, in all things. Thank you, each one of you, for being that global family, for being an angel to some that you serve, for keeping people alive, for enabling children to grow, for discovering and utilizing appropriate techniques and technology, because it's all for this purpose, that as God's beloved creation, made in his likeness, the first fruit of creation, we can taste and see that he is good.